Welcome to another episode of Trial Site News Roundup. Today on our program we'll be discussing two stories. The first from Australia, where the Sydney SuperDome will be used to herd 24,000 high schoolers to receive the Pfizer vaccine. The students are told that this is a golden opportunity. We'll discuss what's happening here. And then Pfizer is revealing its COVID pill study, a potential antiviral treatment. We'll discuss. And so, from Trial Site News, I'm Adrian, and our episode starts now. So let's talk about Australia. In a story that we covered a few days ago on TrialSiteNews.com, where 24,000 children would be ushered into Sydney's SuperDome, also known as Qudos Bank Arena, for a mass high school student vaccination event. According to an Australian government official, the time is now to get, and I quote, as many jabs in the arms as possible. The state government of New South Wales, or the NSW, was planning on busing the high school students from western and southwestern suburbs to what they referred to as a mass vaccination hubs, moving forward with an aggressive program of mass vaccination. Many students, parents, and teachers are opposed to this program, while others are grateful for the opportunity for the protection. With forthcoming annual high school test, authorities find themselves in a panic about the COVID-19 surge. So let's talk then about the COVID-19 situation over there. Australia has experienced two pandemic surges prior to this most severe Delta variant-driven situation. The highest daily death toll in Australia, which has never hit as hard as many other developed nations, was reported as 59 deaths back on September 4th of 2020. From that point on until June of 2021, the country, for the most part, appeared to be keeping the pandemic under control. This was partially due to the fact that the continent is on an island and the government enforced tight border controls. But they also achieved this through a series of what many consider overreaching, draconian lockdowns and quarantines. Australia took lessons from China's zero-tolerance COVID policy, where in that nation, a combination of powerful government controls, contact tracing, pervasive smart app monitoring, and roving lockdowns allowed China to appear to contain the pandemic right up until the new Delta variant arose, which was then followed by a number of outbreaks. Now, as we here at Trial Site News have reported, the costs to local Chinese municipalities is adding up fast, putting growing strains between the local governments and the centralized state. So now let's go back to Australia. In this latest surge, the number of cases are hitting new records. For example, on August 18th, there were reported 658 cases for the 7-day average of new cases, while deaths remain low compared to most countries of this size, with anywhere from 1 to 5 being reported a day. Now, vaccination has been an ongoing issue in Australia, as the pathogen was kept contained, which reduced the pressures on people to get vaccinated. Rates were quite low and hesitancy was high. But those pressures have intensified with the rise in cases, and the vaccination rates are markedly up, as approximately 23% of the nation's population is fully vaccinated, with 40.5% with at least one dose, according to Our World in Data. Now, overall, Australia has been spared the worst of the pandemic. They have recorded a total of 41,521 cases and 972 deaths, which for its population size, these are proportionately low numbers. So, as Sydney experienced the most deaths of the entire pandemic, just recently, the government there and in other cities have become much more serious about enforcing lockdowns and quarantines, as recently reported in Reuters. There have been news reports that the military has been deployed across Australia's biggest city to enforce various mandates, including the lockdowns, which is raising fears for some about the threats to civil liberties and relief to others that public health mandates would be enforced. Because of this, since late July, protests have grown, especially in large cities like Sydney. An example of this would be a report back on July 4th by NPR, who reported on one of the bigger protests, which showed the backlash of the mounting lockdown restrictions in response to the Delta variant-driven surge. The protesters clashed with police, who in turn made numerous arrests after unruly crowds started breaking through barriers. Unmasked protesters carried signs reading "Freedom and the Truth." Now, on one hand, the New South Wales authorities have declared that people have a right to free speech in Australia, while on the other hand, they declared that public health orders supersedes these rights. And so it would seem that the public health officers now run the country in many ways. Meanwhile, as we discussed back on August 9th, with Dr. Fauci pivoting to promote the idea of a COVID pill, it would seem that the race is on for the clinical development of said pill, which of course had largely been ignored for the past year and a half. The market for the early onset antiviral space, as we've previously discussed, could be massive, to the tune of many billions of dollars per year. And so, Pfizer has recently popped up on Facebook, essentially advertising their orally administered protease inhibitor evidencing antiviral activity against SARS-CoV-2. Now, Pfizer's not the only one getting into this game. You have Merck and Roche also competing, among others, to introduce a branded pharmaceutical option. Now, with Merck, who may very well be the furthest along, has molnupiravir. And their quest has been an interesting one, fraught with questionable and aggressive moves, including the attempt to tarnish and discredit the drug ivermectin with a targeted press release. And Roche has their drug AT-527, which also appears close, as they announced a partnership with Atia Pharmaceuticals to get access to the investigational product. So back to Pfizer. They are working on 2 different treatments targeting COVID-19, in addition, of course, to their vaccine. The intravenous early-stage antiviral option known as PF-07304-814. The other product, Pfizer's PF-07321-332, is the investigational product associated with the study advertised on Facebook. In the press release, Pfizer claims that this is the first orally administered coronavirus-specific investigational protease inhibitor to be evaluated in clinical studies, and follows Pfizer's intravenously administered investigational protease inhibitor currently under study. So now let's talk then about the drug's phase 2-3 study. Well, as revealed in the study's website and as advertised on Facebook, Pfizer emphasizes the importance of treatment for those who have COVID-19 symptoms, as well as health conditions that put them at high risk for severe illness. This class of patient, further at risk than the standard mild cases, could benefit from easy-to-use, orally administered antiviral. Now, the phase 2-3 study seeks to determine whether the drug and ritonavir combined are safe and effective for treating adults who are ill with COVID-19 and who do not need to be in the hospital but are at an increased risk for developing severe illnesses. The study centers on visits to the patient's home or another clinic if need be, and the study's duration is 24 weeks. Now, this study has just commenced last month and runs until October 15th of 2021, with final conclusions by the second month in 2022. And that, my friends, brings our episode to a close once more. As always, thank you so much for joining us on this program today. From Trial Site News, I'm Adrian, and I will see you all